So good evening, everyone. For those that don't know me, and I see there's some people on here that don't, my name's Harold Brief, and I'm a member of the Adult Education Committee of Darchi Noam, and I want to welcome you to the meeting, to this session tonight. And again, a happy Mother's Day to all the mothers, aunts, grandmothers out there, and to show that we don't ignore the fathers out there. Our third session is going to be on June 19th, which is Father's Day. So we'll have that. I want to apologize again for those who tried to get in last week. We're all slaves to technology. And once there's a hiccup, then we all suffer the consequences of that. But hopefully everything will run smoothly tonight. We've tested it out, so things seem to be working okay. The Howard session is gonna last around an hour or so, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. And the way to ask a question is to go to your chat and send your question to Helen Fish, who happens to be my sister, and who's running the technical part of this program. So again, welcome. And this is, I think, the third time that Howard has come to Darchi Noam. So for those that don't know Howard, Howard is known as a classical music DJ. He's a retired computer systems consultant who has been an avid listener of classical and orchestral music for many years. More recently, he has researched and studied many aspects of classical music and has prepared lectures that are informative, entertaining, and fun. He has presented at Baycrest, Ryerson, it used to be Ryerson, Toronto, what is it called now? Toronto Metropolitan
University.
Okay, I have to change that. The Life Institute, public libraries, social groups, synagogues, and churches in the GTA, and more recently, the similar venues in Israel. Howard takes a creative approach to his program, often with off-the-wall topics covering everything from Mozart to Mahler, and you'll come away with appreciation of great classical music. And Howard, welcome, and I turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Harold. And it's always fun to do these programs. And I've done a few with Darchi Noam. I remember I did some really great ones in person. I hope we're going to be able to do those again at some point. But in the meantime, let's do them using Zoom. And I think you'll like this program and the following two that I'm going to do. I guess the general theme, Harold, correct me if I'm wrong, is Jewish composers in America. I can't remember exactly how you titled it.
The next one is West Side Story.
Yeah.
And the final one, I think, is Jewish influence on American composers. Or
Europe to America.
Europe to America. Okay.
So there's a series of three. And tonight's program is on Leonard Bernstein. And effectively, I had to divide Leonard Bernstein into two parts. So the first part is tonight. And the second part is going to be the next lecture. And the next lecture is strictly West Side Story. And there's reason why it needs its own program, as you'll soon see. But I want to cover off Leonard Bernstein tonight, and we'll get right into it. So let me share my screen and go into the program. There we go. Okay. And there we go. Okay, so everybody see classical music DJ?
Yes.
Howard Mendelssohn with the skyline of New York,
yes.
Because it's very appropriate for Leonard Bernstein because he is so well known and New York based. And I call this part one, Leonard Bernstein, conductor, teacher, performer, and composer. And when you think about it, Leonard Bernstein was perhaps, arguably, the most influential person in the musical world, and I use that term generally, not just the classical musical world, but the musical world in total, in the 20th century. And I'm going to explain why. You'll see examples of the sorts of things that he did as a conductor, teacher, performer, and composer. and he covered just about everything. And he did it in a way that he's so engaging, and he really brought to life a lot of the concepts that we think of in music, and certainly in classical and orchestral music, no question, but in other related aspects of music too. And you'll get a little piece of that in the program this evening. So I'm going to cover off these 4 aspects of Leonard Bernstein, just so that we get a good general impression of what this guy did and the influence that he had around the world. And there was nobody like him in that respect. I'm also going to include a lot of little quotes that I've picked up by Bernstein, and they're typical of what he's like as a character. When I'm with composers, I say I'm a conductor. When I'm with conductors, I say I am a composer. Like, he really was so influential in all these spheres, all these aspects of music. There was nobody his equal, perhaps before or even afterwards. I don't know. It's you be the judge when we go through all this. So just some general things about his life in general, and you'll see some pictures of him here. He was born in 1918 in a suburb of Boston, Massachusetts, and he died in 1990 at the age of 72, albeit young. I mean, he was a heavy smoker, and I think that eventually did him in, unfortunately. But he lived a very long, a good, solid, active life. Now, one of the interesting things about how Leonard got started in this music business is kind of interesting, because he was living in Boston. His father was he ran a furniture business, and his father wanted Leonard to become part of this furniture business, and his father was given an opportunity to expand the business, and apparently he turned it down, and his father could have become a multi-gazillionaire, but he, for a variety of reasons, he didn't follow through with it. But at any rate, Leonard, as a young boy, his father's sister was going through a divorce, and I think it was kind of a nasty divorce, and she wanted to save the piano that she had in her apartment. So in order to save it, she moved the piano from her apartment to Leonard Bernstein's parents' apartment. And therefore, young Leonard, at the age of about, 6 years old or something, had access to a piano, which he enjoyed quite a bit and started to play it and became very interested in music. And his parents gave him music lessons. And he's quite a precocious young lad. And he really progressed that way through his studies in school. And he was a very good student at the Boston Latin School. And he went through school learning piano, becoming very interested in music, went to study at Harvard, but he didn't study music at Harvard. He just got a Bachelor of Arts degree. I guess he took some courses in music, but he wasn't all that interested at that point. But he went through Harvard, graduated with honors, and then decided, was trying to figure out what he wanted to do. He saw he had this aptitude towards music, but he wasn't quite, jumping at the bit to get into it. And people would have thought, oh, you should have gone to the Juilliard School of Music in New York. It was the top music school of the day. But he didn't bother getting around to enlisting at Juilliard. He ended up going to the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia, which is also a very, very good school of music. And as a result of his work at the Curtis Institute, he got into conducting, and they offered special courses in conducting, and that became his forte. Along the lines, like he was doing, during the summers, he would be the music director at summer camps and doing all this sorts of thing. But eventually he graduated from the Curtis Institute in Philadelphia and with his skills as a conductor, and eventually got a job as an assistant conductor at the Boston Symphony, working under Serge Koussevitzky, a very, very famous conductor at the time. And that's where he sort of got his real apprenticeship as a conductor. But he was dabbling in all sorts of different kinds of music and, doing a variety of things, putting on shows, really becoming, quite an active person. He eventually worked his way to New York and got a job as the assistant conductor at the New York Philharmonic. And his big breakthrough came in 1943. The conductor of the New York Symphony, Bruno Walter, was supposed to conduct a performance, and he took ill, and therefore the assistant conductor, Leonard Bernstein, took over that particular performance. Now, as an assistant conductor, they say that all you end up doing is picking up the sheets of music at the end of every rehearsal and organizing them. But Bernstein was more, quite a capable assistant conductor. He took over the conducting duties for this performance in 1943. So he was all of about 25 at the time. And it was a huge success. It was broadcast on, I think, CBS radio, and people were astounded at the quality of the performance that Bernstein gave in his 1943 conducting debut with the New York Philharmonic. And then after that performance, he became more of a regular conductor with the New York Philharmonic at that time. And he eventually established for himself a worldwide reputation. So along with conducting the New York Philharmonic, he gave performances all over the world. He was in demand all over the world. Here is a picture. You can see him in the middle right here. He's actually playing the piano, but this was done just after Israel's War of Independence in Beersheba in an open air concert. There's some old wall here that's kind of falling apart here, but he put on this performance for the Israeli soldiers, and you can see how they're all crowded around this little sort of makeshift venue here. And he put on a big performance for them in appreciation of the fact that, hey, Israel was a new country, and it just fought this war, or actually, I think effectively they're still fighting that war of independence at that time. But he gave a benefit concert to the Israeli soldiers at that time. And he just started being recognized all over the world, for his skills as a conductor and really more as a communicator, as you'll see shortly. He just kept, he eventually became the chief, the main conductor of the New York Philharmonic Orchestra, that position he held until about 1969. And again, but he was in demand all over the world. Here's another example in Jerusalem of July 1967, just after the Six-Day War. This is an album cover actually that he put together with Leonard Bernstein, Isaac Stern, the Israel Philharmonic. And here they are doing a concert on Mount Scopus, as you can see with the whole orchestra there. So he was doing things like this, really, making getting himself known and becoming very much an influential person around the world in music. Notice here also, he's performing Mahler's Second Symphony. When you hear the music of Gustav Mahler, and I do a separate lecture on that, and that's worth one on its own. Gustav Mahler himself is a very interesting character, but Gustav Mahler's music was ignored. There's a long story to his battles with the experts in Vienna at the time. This is back around the early part of the 20th century. But after Mahler died, his music was virtually ignored around the world until Bernstein revived it. And Mahler became a big feature with the Vienna Philharmonic of all orchestras, resurrecting the music of Gustav Mahler. And they're it's very, very significant. So here's another example of how Bernstein is making his presence felt all over the world. Perhaps one of his most famous concerts was this one done just before, about a year before he died, on Christmas Day in 1989, just after the fall of the Berlin Wall. He went to Berlin and he took an active part in leading. It was a combination of the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra along with musicians. I'm not sure exactly if it was a full orchestra or not, along with musicians from East Berlin, all performing this concert, celebrating the fall of the Iron Curtain and the fall of the Berlin Wall. So here's a picture of him with a cigarette, of course, chiseling a hole in the Berlin Wall in 1989, just after the fall of the Iron Curtain. And the significance of this performance was that one of the pieces of music that they played was Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, which is nicknamed the Ode to Joy. But Bernstein, recognizing the importance of the fact that the Berlin Wall had fallen, he changed the words to the vocal part of the Ninth Symphony. And instead of calling it Ode to Joy, which is Freude in German, he changed it to Ode to Freiheit, which is freedom in German. And this just shows you how conscious, how aware he was of what was going on at the times, and how he could make music a very integral and important part of real life events like the fall of the Berlin Wall here. And really, he became a real hero to a lot of the people who were just finally being rescued from the shackles of the Iron Curtain back in the day. So there's a good general overview of how significant Leonard Bernstein was, both in supporting his Jewish roots, which he never forgot, and we'll sort of deal with that a little bit. We're going to deal with that a little bit later today, and for sure next week, or next program that I do, and really just recognized all over the world for his efforts in using music as a vehicle to make this a better world, and he was very successful in that. So I'm going to give you examples of Bernstein as a conductor, teacher, performer, and composer, and I'm going to go through some musical examples of each one. Again, another interesting quote by him: "I'm not interested in having an orchestra sound like itself. I want it to sound like the composer." Now, this is something that he really perfected. He was trying to get into, when he would do a musical piece, he was trying to get into the head of the composer, get into the head of Beethoven or Haydn or Mozart or whoever it was, whoever's music he was playing that day, and try and determine what that composer wanted in that particular piece of music. And that's what his objective was in doing this. So without further ado, let's watch Leonard Bernstein conducting the New York Philharmonic Orchestra, playing movement number 3 from Beethoven's Symphony number 7. Now, when you watch this video, watch very carefully. You will see that there is a black violinist in the orchestra. Bernstein was the guy who integrated the New York Philharmonic Orchestra and made it a welcome place for Black musicians. So watch this very carefully. Beethoven's Symphony number 7, movement number 3, as conducted by Leonard Bernstein. Right here. Here. there you get a good example of Bernstein the Conductor, with just really excited and enthusiastic, and his excitement and enthusiasm just spill right over into the orchestra and the audience, as you'll see. As I said, he had worldwide fame. Here he is conducting the finale from Shostakovich's Symphony No. 5, and just watch how deep he gets into the movements. He really becomes part of the performance with this. Let's watch a little excerpt from Shostakovich's Symphony No. 5 with the London Symphony Orchestra. So there's a good example of how he really gets involved deeply with these pieces. We're going to see another one similar to this. Here he is. Here you see how he works hard and he's passionate. Here he's conducting the final bit of La Valse by Maurice Ravel with the National Orchestra of France. And you would think that there was no air conditioning in this concert hall, the way that Bernstein is working and sweating. He really works hard, and he's very passionate about what he does. Here we go. Good workout. So there you see again how hard he works at it, and really his enthusiasm wears off on the orchestra and the audience. Now, here's a really cute little thing. I call this eyebrow conducting. This is Haydn, the movement number 4 from Haydn's Symphony number 88. But one of the keys to conducting is not just how you conduct as the performance is being done, but it's also what you do to rehearse the orchestra and make sure that they're doing the things that you want them to do. And when you can get the orchestra at that state, yeah, you don't have to do anything. And watch how Bernstein conducts using simply his eyebrows. Haydn's Symphony number 88, movement 4, with the Vienna Philharmonic. See that once you get your orchestra trained properly, they can do anything you want them to do. And that was another, very important feature of Bernstein and his approach to conducting. Okay, I want to move on to Bernstein, the teacher. The quote here: "Technique is communication. The two words are synonymous in conductors, and communication was perhaps the thing that he did best. He communicated to everybody, and I'll give you some examples of how this is done right here. The key thing that he did was these young people's concerts. And I remember my mother making me watch a number of these when I was a little boy on the old black and white TV. And he introduced a lot of music to an awful lot of people that way. And I think there is a lingering effect of what these young people's concerts did. So I want to go back to December 21st, 1962, with this program that he did called What is a Melody? And you're going to go back to your old black and white TV, And we're going to watch the first little bit of this young people's concert and just get an appreciation for how he's communicating, how he's trying to deliver the message of music and music education to young people. So put yourself back, however old you were back in 1962, and let's relive the day. It's a lot of fun. Here we go.
From Philharmonic Hall in Lincoln Center, home of the world's greatest musical events, another program in the award-winning series, the New York Philharmonic Young People's Concerts, under the musical direction of Leonard Bernstein.
And here is Mr. Bernstein.
My dear young friends, on our last program, we devoted so much time to introducing our new Philharmonic Hall to you and to introducing you to the new science of acoustics that we didn't get to talk very much about music. So today, we're going to make up for lost time and talk about the meat and potatoes of music, the main course, which is melody. Now, to some people, music and melody are the same thing. It's the whole meal, so to speak. When you think of music, you think of melody right away. And they're right in a way, because what is music anyway, except sounds that change and move along in time? And that's practically a definition of melody, too. A series of notes that move along in time, one after another. Well, if that's true, then it's almost impossible to write music that doesn't have melody in it. I mean, if a melody is simply one note coming after another, how can a composer avoid writing melodies if he just writes notes? He must write melodies all the time. For example, he writes one note, then he writes another. Well, that's already a sort of melody. It's a two-note melody. Sort of. Then we add another note. Well, it's already a little more melodious, isn't it? But if he then adds a few more, well, we've got Mendelssohn's Wedding March. See how simple it is? Where there's music, there's melody. Can't have one without the other. Well, then why do so many people complain about music that has no melody? Some people say they don't like Bach fugues because they don't find them melodic. And others say the same thing about Wagner operas, and others about modern music, and others about jazz. What do you suppose they mean when they say it's not melodic? What are they talking about? Isn't any string of notes a melody? Well, I think the answer is in the fact that melody can be a lot of different things. It can be a tune, or it can be a theme, or a motive, or a long melodic line, or a bass line, or an inner voice, all those things. And the minute we understand the difference among all those kinds of melody, then I think we'll be able to understand the whole problem. You see, people usually think of melody as a tune, something you can go out whistling, that's easy to remember, that sticks in your mind. What's more, a tune almost never goes out of the range of the normal human singing voice, that is, too high or too low. Nor should a tune have phrases that last longer than the normal breath can sing them. After all, melody is the singing side of music, just as rhythm is the dancing side. But the most important thing about a tune is usually that it's complete in itself. It seems to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it leaves you feeling satisfied. In other words, it's a song. like Gershwin's Summertime or Schubert's Serenade or your favorite Elvis Presley number. But in symphonic music, which is what we're mostly concerned with here, tunes aren't exactly in order because since they're complete in themselves, tunes don't cry out for further development. And as I hope you remember from former programs of ours, development is the main thing in symphonic music, the growing of a melodic seed into a big symphonic tree. So that seed mustn't be a complete tune, but rather a melody that leaves something still to be said, to be developed. And that kind of melody is called a theme. Well, that's already a problem for those people who are always expecting music to consist of full-blown tunes. So they naturally find these incomplete themes less melodic, let's say. I suppose then they should complain about the famous four-note theme that opens Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. That's hardly melodic at all. Or about this theme from his Seventh Symphony, which is mostly harping on the same note. But both of those themes are kind of melodies, even though they're not tunes. That's the important thing to remember. They're not tunes, but they're themes. Now, of course, there are symphonic themes that are much more melodious than those. Only think of Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony, for example.
Okay, so there you get a good example of what his young people's concerts were all about, where he's trying to explain some of the more technical aspects about what music is all about. But he could relate to young people with their rock music very well. Here, he's introducing a technical term in music called mixolydian, but he's doing the analogy to rock music. So let's watch this for a few minutes. He's really interesting. You can see what a great communicator he is. Here we go.
Or do you remember a really terrific song, a barbaric number of a few years ago, sung by a group known as the Kinks? It's called You Really Got Me. Girl, you really got me going. You got me so I can't sleep at night. Yeah, you really got me now. You got me so I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, you really, That's all mixolydian. Now, here's another piece in the Dorian mode. I wonder if you know this one. Every time I think that I'm the only one who's lonely, someone calls on me. And every now and then I spend my time with rhyme and verse and curse the fault in me. And then along comes Perry, our old friend, Help, as sung by the Beatles. Help me if you can, I'm feeling down. And I do appreciate you being right. Help me get my feet back on the ground. Won't you please on? Or I wonder if you know that absolutely charming Beatles tune called Norwegian Wood. You hear that? My baby does the hanky-panky. Mixolydian. Or take this piece of boogie-woogie.
So there you see how he's able to communicate to young people with the music that they know best, yet he's still educating them on concepts in orchestral music. He was also a university lecturer. I'm not going to go into this one. It does get technical, and he could be as technical as anybody else when he discusses Mozart and symmetry and a lot of Mozart's music. And again, he was second to none, whether he's dealing with university graduates or young people in the young people's concerts. But here's an interesting example of of his analysis of Beethoven's Symphony Number 3, the Eroica Symphony, and listen to his comments about Beethoven. I remember listening to this complete session that he had describing Symphony Number 3, and then listening to Symphony 3 itself a couple of years ago. And he really gets to the crux of the matter and explains it just beautifully. So here we go, an analysis of Beethoven's Symphony Number 3.
Can you imagine what it's like to stand on the podium being about to conduct the Eroica Symphony of Beethoven? One is at last face to face with Beethoven the giant, Zeus with the thunderbolt, Thor with his hammer. And in this first movement alone, the hammer blows rain thick and fast, beginning with the two opening chords. And hardly ever letting up. I mean, before you know it, you get this. And before you know it, you've got this. Even in the lyrical sections, there are constant unexpected stabs, sforzati, punctuating the flowing lines, like here. There's one place where you wouldn't expect stabs, but they come. Boom, boom, boom. Little stabs infecting this flowing line. There's no let-up in this tension. Beethoven stamps and howls his way through more than 15 minutes. And that's only the first movement. All in all, he keeps it up for a good 50 minutes. But it's not all stamping and howling. People tend to pigeonhole composers as well as artists in general. And Beethoven's pigeonhole is clearly labeled the raging titan. He stamps and he howls. Charm, for example, is not one of the attributes usually associated with Beethoven, nor is the gift for pure melody, as it is associated with Schubert, say, or with Tchaikovsky. And yet, there is charm abounding in this symphony, as well as one of the prettiest tunes on record. All of which goes to prove that when one is dealing with a spirit as cosmic as that of Beethoven's, whatever one says invites a counterstatement or a contradiction. The answer to the Beethoven phenomenon is not really expressible, except in terms of the mysterious genius of a man who is capable of uniting all contradictions into one single perfect entity.
So there you get a good analysis of Symphony Number 3, and it really is one of the most significant symphonies in the whole classical music repertoire. And again, Bernstein just explains it beautifully. So there's some good examples of Bernstein as a teacher. And I want to move now to Bernstein the Performer. So we're going to listen to a couple little excerpts here. I'm going to give you two examples. One is a traditional classical piece, Mozart's Piano Concerto Number 17. And the other is a more modern jazzy piece, George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. And again, the quote here by Bernstein, "I can't live one day without hearing music, playing it, studying it, or thinking about it. It was so much part of his life." And again, here, I'm giving you two different dimensions of Bernstein the Performer, the traditional classical piece and a more modern jazz piece, and he covers them off beautifully. In both cases, he's also conducting as well as playing the piano solo parts. So let's listen first to a little bit of Mozart's Piano Concerto Number 17. And this is with the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. No, or I think it's the Vienna Philharmonic, sorry. Okay, so there you see a traditional classical piece by Mozart, and Bernstein's as good as anybody. Now let's turn it over to a jazzy piece, Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. And let's watch how he adapts his piano playing to this more modern piece of music and conducts at the same time. See, he transitions from that classical world to the jazz world as a performer just effortlessly, and really there's nothing that he couldn't do. Yeah, we are running a little bit short of time, and I want to get on to a couple other things. So we're going to move on to Bernstein, the composer. And his quote here is, "To achieve great things, two things are needed, a plan and not quite enough time." And he was he was under the pressure to do a lot of composing, and he loved composing. And we're going to listen. A lot of the stuff that he composed was basic. There was some traditional classical stuff, but I don't think that was his real forte. I think his strength as a composer was in more popular stuff, particularly musicals. And he loved musicals. He was part of a group that included Betty Comden and Adolph Green and Judy Holliday. And they used to get together as a foursome and do compose stuff on the fly and perform stuff in New York, in Greenwich Village. And he was a real, he knew what it took to compose things really, really well. He wrote this musical called On the Town in 1944, and it's really a great, great piece of music, mostly as a kind of a Broadway musical, but still aspects of it are still popular today. So let's listen to an outdoor performance of this in Rotterdam, of all places. I think it was the Dutch national holiday, and it's performed by this young orchestra on the outdoors in Rotterdam, and you'll get a feeling for Times Square as composed by Leonard Bernstein. Now, he composes a piece of music for a musical, and it becomes a great orchestral sweep on its own. Bright, lively, jazzy, just like he liked it. He only he could write it. Now, he did have a huge failure, and this is this operetta that he composed, Candide, which is a revival of that old story, Candide. He tried to make it an operetta, and they've tried to make a go of this, and it just, every time they do it, it fails miserably. However, the Overture to Candide is a standard piece in the orchestral repertoire. And it's played quite a bit even today. So let's listen to the Overture to the failed opera by Bernstein, Candide. And this is performed by the London Symphony with Leonard Bernstein conducting it himself. you have the overture to Candide, a failure as an operetta, but that piece, that overture, it's by itself is performed quite a bit by orchestras all over the world today. And it's the, I guess the last remaining piece of Candide that's really still popular. Okay, I've covered off Bernstein as a conductor, teacher, performer, and composer. How do I wrap this up? The last word. Music can name the unnameable and communicate the unknowable. That's Bernstein and a good way to summarize it. But how else do you summarize it? Well, I can't do such a great job, but I know somebody who can. And this was done at a 70th birthday bash for him, which would have been in, I guess, 1988 when he turned 70. And it was a piece written by Stephen Sondheim, with whom he composed the music to West Side Story. It was written by Sondheim, and this is performed by Lauren Bacall. Now, I can't do as good a job as Lauren Bacall, so I'm going to let her do everything that you'll see here. There is a reference made to Kurt Weill in this, sort of an oblique reference, kind of a joke, because it's based on a piece of music originally written by Kurt Weill called The Saga of Jenny, from his Kurt Weill's Broadway musical, The Lady in the Dark. But Sondheim took it and he wrote this beautiful summary of Leonard Bernstein, covering off Bernstein as a conductor, teacher, performer, composer, and just a great, great guy. So let's watch and listen to Lauren Bacall go through the Saga of Lenny. And by the way, it's introduced by Beverly Sills, just briefly. So here we go.
Lenny, in honor of your 70th birthday, Stephen Sondheim has written a song just for you. It's called The Saga of Lenny, accompanied by Paul Ford. Please welcome Miss Lauren Bacall.
Listen to this very carefully. It's really funny.
There once was a boy named Lenny, whose talents were varied and many, so many that he was inclined never to make up his mind. In fact, he was so gifted, he seldom felt uplifted, just undefined. Poor Lenny, 10 gifts too many, the curse of being versatile. To show how bad the curse is, we'll need a lot of verses and take a little vial. Lenny made his mind up when he was 3. He'd write a show, a ballet, and a symphony. But once the winds were tootled and the first strings plucked, he decided it was terrible, he'd have to conduct. Poor Lenny, time and again he complained, I'm in this dreadful bind. I feel for Leonardo, God, genius is so hard. Oh, you cannot make up your mind. Lenny made his mind up when he was 9. He'd be not only Bernstein, he'd be Rubinstein. But just Rubinstein, he grumbled, that's like calling it quits when there's Hammerstein and Wittgenstein and Gertrude and Blitz. Poor Lenny knew there and then he might easily get oversteined. From Ein to Epp to Julie to Liechtenstein, oh, truly, he could not make up his mind. Lenny made his mind up at 22. to do whatever Pinzer or Astaire could do. Though his voice was truly bass, he had the charm of a kid. And if the dance floor didn't suit him, the podium did. Poor Lenny, wondering when he could show off all his gifts combined. Began a TV feature, it's best to be a teacher when you can't make up your mind. Lenny made his mind up at 28 that marriage and a family would be just great. But he had no time for weddings till the great day came. He was free between a tennis and an anagrams game. Poor Lenny, worse though poor Jenny, who muttered all those years, resigned. I don't care if he picks a schlemazel or a shikser, he should please make up his mind. Lenny made his mind up at 46 that maybe atonality and rock would mix. Though it certainly was cereal with rhythm on top, it had lots of snap and crackle, but not enough pop. Poor Lenny, pacing his Jenny, was worried he'd be left behind. He mumbled how ironic, atonal is a tonic when you can't make up your mind. So is minimalism. Lenny made his mind up at 7-0 to be a modern Renaissance-like man, you know. And there's virtually nothing that he hasn't done. So get ready for his club act at 71. Poet, Montessier, politician, skier, still at sea at 10. Decked with every laurel, Lenny, here's the moral. Do whatever pleases you and when. Follow all your talents, don't attempt to balance. Shower us with every kind. Share your every vision, stick with indecision. Don't make up, you shouldn't make up. You mustn't make up, don't ever make up. Live another score, write another score, and don't make up your mind.
Well, I don't think I could have summarized that any better myself, but Lauren Bacall certainly did that along with the music of Stephen Sondheim. And that's Leonard Bernstein for you, the last word. Mr. Everything in music, as I said, and I hope you got a good feeling for what he was all about. In the next session, I'm going to do West Side Story. And like I said before, it needs a whole program all on its own. And there's, I'll give you a little hint on this one. There's a lot of Jewish elements into West Side Story, even though it's all about these Puerto Ricans and Irish in the streets of New York. There is a heavy, heavy Jewish influence in West Side Story. And we're going to, hopefully we'll uncover a little bit of that next time. So I hope you enjoyed this program. That's it for this evening. Oh, I'm going to take any questions that you have. And I really had a lot of fun doing it. It's always fun.
That's great. We did have a number of questions come in, and I guess because of the time, I'm just going to shorten it to a few. Several of our participants offered up some recordings that they thought the group might be interested in. First of all, Hatikva on Mount Scopus is available on Spotify, if anybody wants to get it there. And Bob Whitty's told us that Ravel's Balsi is available on YouTube. It's a piano duet with the German-Japanese pianist named Alicia Sarah Ott and Francesco Tristano. So those were two things that were identified as being of interest. The other questions, one of the questions was mixolydium. Can you tell us what it is?
I have no clue. I honestly, I don't know. It was a technical term that Bernstein was covering as part of, that young people's concert. And he was just, I use this as an example of saying, hey, here's a heavy duty technical concept, but watch and listen to how he connects it to rock and roll music. And he's showing you how, sort of the commonality of music is across all genres of music, classical, orchestral, rock and roll, jazz, folk, whatever. There's a certain common denominator across all of them. And this is what Bernstein was trying to get across, because he wasn't a real stuffed shirt in that respect. He wanted to make music something that was enjoyable and understandable for everybody.
Thank you. One of the other questions we had was, why was Candide a flop?
Good question. I've heard parts of it and I thought it was pretty good, but again, I can't say I'm a real expert in it. And again, the only thing that survived out of Candide was that overture that we heard. And I think there was one other little piece that I've heard occasionally from Candide, but he just couldn't get it going. I mean, he had his share of disappointments and failures. Let's put it that way. Every composer does. Not everything they do, really makes it. And just Candide just didn't make it. But then, if you notice, the date on Candide was 1956. He came out with West Side Story like the year after, and that piece is here for eternity. Go figure.
Yeah. And I have one last question, and then I'm going to turn it over to Aggie. We noticed, there's several people in the audience noticed that the first clip you played of Beethoven, that although you had identified that there was a Black violinist, there were no women in that particular orchestra. And then when we got to the Rhapsody piece, there were not quite a few, but there were a number of women. Was there a period when there were no women in the orchestra?
Oh yeah, it's.
And when did they start being included?
I think an orchestra like the New York, I can't pinpoint the date exactly, but certainly the New York Philharmonic would have been one of the leading orchestras to bring women into it. Interestingly enough, the Vienna Orchestra, where Bernstein did an awful lot of guest conducting, was one of the last orchestras to bring women in. And I've seen on some of the other programs that I've done, I've had clips of the Vienna Philharmonic, and listen, they're a fabulous orchestra, no question. And there's virtually no women in it, even to until fairly recently. So this is a phenomenon that's it varies all over the world, and I guess in the United States and Canada, for that matter, we're a little bit more on the progressive side in that respect, and thank goodness for that.
Right, thank you. And I'm now going to ask Aggie to unmute, and she has a few final words to say.
Okay.
Before I thank you, Howard, I'd like to answer the question about women in orchestras. The Berlin Philharmonic didn't have women for a long time. And that wasn't because women weren't allowed to audition, but they were never chosen. So somebody came up with the idea of let's have auditions behind a screen without the name of the player. Mm. And lo and behold, 3 of the auditioners turned out to be women. And they were the first women that were hired to the Berlin Philharmonic. So I don't remember the year. I just remember the reading about the auditions behind screens to even the field for women, because there was a bias in selecting.
And again, when you look at it that way, it varies across the cultural, I don't know what the word is, cultural milieu or background of each particular orchestra, the country that it's in. And I guess the Germanic countries like Austria and Germany just were very reluctant to bring in women. Yet I've seen, it's interesting because I've done a lot of, I've got several clips from, I think it's the Frankfurt Symphony Orchestra, and they are fantastic. And there's there's a lot of women in there now. So, hopefully those days are well behind us.
So Howard, thank you so much for bringing Leonard Bernstein to life for us. And if other people in the audience are like me, we've known Leonard Bernstein mostly as a conductor and also as a composer, but it was just wonderful to see him as a teacher. And I would have liked to see him as a university teacher or university instructor, as you mentioned he was, because the way he explained things to those kids really spoke to me. And I wish I'd have had that experience.
It's Mother's Day, and it's Mother's Day, and I have to thank my mother for drilling that into me, way back when I was a young kid.
Anyway, that was great. And while you were showing us the facial conducting of Leonard Bernstein, because it wasn't only his eyebrows, it was his whole face. I had you on half my screen, and I was watching you, Howard, and Leonard Bernstein showed his passion on screen, but I was watching you as well, and your face reflected his passion. And I have to thank you, because your passion is just communicated to us. So thank you so much for coming on.
This is just straightforward fun for me. I just enjoy it. I've given this program several times, and it's fun every time I do it.
Anyway, I'm sure I see people in the audience, and they agree with me that your passion also came across, and we look very much forward to the next session, which will be a continuation of Leonard Bernstein, as you've mentioned, West Side Story, on June 12th. So please mark it in your calendars. And then our last session, I wish it could go on and on and on, but it will be the last for now, on June the 19th, which will be Father's Day. And then we will be able to wish you a happy Father's Day.
Thank you. This is great fun, and just enjoy doing it. I could go on and on and on, but it is getting late.
We can go on and on listening to you.
Yeah, well, I don't know. When it's fun, it's easy, and I don't know. I guess I've just had it instilled in me, and again, when you look at somebody like Bernstein, he just radiates it all over the place, and you become part of it. And that's what he was trying to do. And you got to admit, he was very, very successful.
Very successful. Thank you again.
Thank you.
We'll see you all on the 12th.
Okay. Bye-bye. Keep well.
Bye-bye. See you next week.